So hello everyone, and welcome to this session. This session is, we're just gonna have a little conversation with our coaches. And so we appreciate you all for being here. So to get us started, what we wanna do is we wanna go around the room. We have three of our outstanding coaches with us today. We have Autumn, we have Jennifer, and Carrie. Autumn is out of the North Carolina State University. Carrie's from University of Kentucky, and Jennifer's from Auburn University. So what we'll do is we'll just start off with the three of them. They're going to give a little background on who they are, why they're coaching, and one of the things that they get out of coaching. And then we'll open it up to everyone to ask questions about, and really to ask questions about how to best use your coach and just different things that may come to your mind. So I'll go ahead and I'll stop rambling on, and I'll turn it over to Autumn to start us off.
Sure thing, Philip. Thank you. So why am I a coach? Well, I started my career as a grown-up person after I got out of grad school in CYFAR. I was immediately hired in working with and Carrie is about to smile at me, Children, Youth, and Families Extension Research Network, CYFARnet, which was a precursor to the PDTA. And I got to work, actually the first real meeting I went to was a CYFAR conference in Georgia. And I grabbed hold of Carrie and held on to her for dear life, because the CYFAR conference, not like this event, was a much larger thing. And it was my first conference experience. And so there's like me looking at 2,000 people. And Carrie's like, can you help me set up this thing? And I'm like, absolutely, I am your girl, and stuck to her. So I have a passion for working with vulnerable youth and families. I have a passion for cultural competency and inclusion and diversity and all of the, however you want to label it, making sure that everybody has a seat at the table. And so I'm really passionate about that work. And what do I get out of this? I get to every month talk to really bright people who are doing really incredible work, and help them try to think outside the box, try to think about any of the challenges that they're having and work through solutions. And it builds my own practice. So, Carrie.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Carrie Ashurst with the University of Kentucky, and I have been in Extension for 23 years. I was hired right out of a master's program in marriage and family therapy to be a state coordinator of a CYFAR grant. And back in that day and time, we had 8 grant sites doing 8 different things and being evaluated in 8 different ways. And I learned a lot that first couple of years, I'll tell you what. But I also fell in love. Originally, I started onto a grant thinking, okay, this is going to be my job for a couple of years, and I'll start a private practice as a therapist. But I fell so deeply in love with CYFAR that now here I am, still 22 plus years later, and have been working now in a coaching role with Philip and crew for a couple of years, and get to work with some amazing states. Like Autumn said, a big part of why I love what I get to do is I get to work with some of the most creative minds and people who are doing the change work out there. You know, they're changing lives, and it's absolutely amazing to get to be a part of all of that. But it's been an absolutely amazing ride to get to work, like Autumn said, all the way back as far as CYFARnet, which and the large national CYFAR conferences and things that we used to have. And then nowadays working with the coaching model and the PDTA Center and all of the people that have come and gone through the years all over this country, some of whom were already doing this work before I was even born. So it's been a pretty magical experience to get to be a part of it all.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jennifer Wells Marshall. Let's see. I have been in cooperative extension, since 1998. And if I count the time that I was a work study student at Tuskegee University, I did my my work study job was in extension. And I'll be honest and tell you, at that time, I didn't really know what extension was. I knew it was something that had to do with agriculture, but I really wasn't sure exactly what it was. It wasn't until I went to graduate school at Auburn University, and my graduate research assistantship was funded by a CYFAR project. And it was the Begin Education Early program, and that was many moons ago. It was funded in 98, 99. And it was actually my first introduction to components that create high quality programs. And so I learned at that time that I absolutely love where the rubber meets the road. I love being with program participants. You know, I'm the person that's going to sit with program participants at lunch. I love to be near where change happens. And I've moved through the ranks, you know, in extension, you know, from county extension agent to, you know, interim assistant director for FCS. And the one thing that I have held true through all of the years is I have to be where the programs happen. And that has always been a deal breaker for me. You know, I've never wanted to be the person who sits in an office and makes decisions for people who I don't see, touch, or talk to. And so what I love about CYFAR is that it gives me the opportunity to do two things that I love, and that is I work with individuals who serve families and children, create programs in a way that is most suitable for the audience that they are intended to serve. And that's not necessarily following a cookie cutter approach. CYFAR allows you to really think creative about what your families really need, and allows you to, you know, to put into practice what you feel like is going to work for your participants. And it can look different. You know, if you have 3 sites, it can look different in three sites, but also allows some structure where we can tell a CYFAR story at the national level that allows funding to continue to come in to support the families that need us most. So let's see why I like coaching. The same reasons that Autumn and Carrie have talked about. I love being able to see the work happen. I like month to month hearing the things that have worked really well, things that didn't work well. I like being able to tell, you know, different sites, well, you know, I have one site that tried this, maybe it'll work for you. You know, so it's just the networking, the opportunity to see people really push themselves beyond what they thought they could do, and then having the flexibility that CYFAR offers to allow you to really be creative and serve families in a way that they need us to serve them.
Well, thank you so very much. So now I'll just open it up to everyone out there if you have any questions for our coaches. And while people are thinking about questions or things they want to talk about or discuss, I'll ask a question to the coaches, which is, what are some of the best practices that you have seen over the years from different sites?
I'll say planning, using that first year to plan. There was a time when CYFAR didn't necessarily offer that 1 year defined as a planning year. You know, the CYFAR project that I had funded, it was, you know, you were expected to jump in and go when you first started. There was no designated time to stop and plan. But what we noticed is that those sites that unofficially took that time to plan, those sites fared, you know, much better in terms of their ability to implement and be able to pivot when change was necessary. So what I would say most importantly is take the time to plan. Take the time to hire the right people the first time, because once you get them, in a university system, it is hard to get rid of them, you know, and so unless you hire them on a TES status, but then that creates, you know, another set of issues. So I would say take the year that CYFAR offers now to plan. And those best practices to me include hiring the right staff, making sure you spend time building the right community partners, making sure you have the right support for your data collection, and making sure that you have the buy-in of the families that you're serving, especially if you're serving young people who don't drive. Somebody's got to take them to a training, somebody's got to pick them up and drop them off. And so the person who has the burden of the pickup and the drop off needs to understand how important it is for the participant to be involved.
All of what Jennifer just said, all of it. And I don't think it can be overstated the importance of building up your team. These grants are complex. There are a lot of moving parts and pieces. Someone has to handle the university HR, paperwork, whatever. Somebody has to handle talking to, building rapport with, being connected to community partners. That takes a skill set. You need somebody in that spot who has that skill set. I am not that person, just saying. Someone has to set up the evaluation. I might be that person, but they have to know evaluation. And they probably need a support person or a student or somebody that can help them, like with data entry or whatever needs to happen. Because usually the folks who know evaluation are very busy people, because not a lot of people have that skill set, I find. And there is a distinction between what is research and what is evaluation. Someone has to know how to set up a program or a curriculum or how to find one for you. Someone has to train your people. Like, there's all of these moving parts and pieces, and it's really important to build that team who can make that happen. Carrie, I'll push off to you and think a little bit more, but like, I can't overstate, like, hang out with and build rapport with your people, because it's really important to have a strong team.
Absolutely, yes. And a couple of things that I would add to that are flexibility, listening, and embracing the gray. And I laugh when I say embracing the gray every time, because I think that's been the story of my career in extension in general, but especially with grants like CYFAR, where what you start with is not what you're necessarily going to end with, and that's okay. And in fact, that's what CYFAR expects. That you know, what we start off implementing and evaluating and things, you know, we're gonna have those voices that are telling us, parents, children, saying this is what we need, this is what we want, and we need to evolve the program. And sometimes that gray area is scared to work in at times, right? When we don't have that nice polished little step-by-step guide to go by. But the very evolution of these programs is what gets us exactly to where we need to be in terms of filling those needs and making those changes in lives of the families and the children we're working with. And I'm a talker, and I'll be the first one to admit it, but sometimes I just have to sit back and say, I've got to listen. I've got to listen to what people are saying to me is working, isn't working, and not taking any offense to that at all. You know, when someone tells me something isn't working, that can be as important or more important at times, because then I know, okay, maybe we quit going down this road altogether, or maybe we need to move this road over here, and that what we ultimately end up with then is better for it.
Think about sustainability from day one. I think that's really important. And even before day one, if you have that opportunity to go in and build rapport with your communities and your sites and to do a true needs assessment, think about what sustainability looks like and who needs to be involved in that from day one, because when you get to year 5, it's too late. Like, you can't run out in year 5 and be like, okay, now we got to build sustainability. Who's going to pay for this? And nobody is going to jump up and be ready to pay for your program for you. So just really thinking about what are all those moving parts and pieces to build a sustainable program.
And of course, at any time, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to jump in. But my next question for the panel would be, you know, we talked a little bit about best practices. You talked about different things. One of the things that came up was evaluation. So I really wanted to kind of explore that a little bit more. when you look at sites that have done a better job with evaluation, what were some of the things that they did that allowed them to be more successful?
I'll say, Philip, the ability to really think through multiple ways to collect data and not stop at the first obstacle, right? So anytime we're, dealing with data, is very messy. Data collection is a very messy process. It requires all of the stars to be aligned at any given moment. Everything has to be working in tandem. And that's just not the nature of programming. It's not the nature of people. It's not the nature of staff or the university, the IRB. So there's so many moving parts to being able to physically collect data that have to work together before you can even start. And so what I've noticed is that data collection works best when it is planned into the programming process, not necessarily seen as an add-on and it's somebody's fifth job, right? Like, they're the person that is scheduling, they're the person that's doing travel vouchers, and oh yeah, by the way, we need this data collected. That to me is one of the worst practices, if that is even a thing, right? Like, evaluation work requires a person who is dedicated to doing that work, because otherwise it's one of those things that always takes a back burner. Unless you are in an evaluation role and it's something that you just naturally love to do, it's going to take the back burner, because most people in extension, they're implementers. It's just what you do naturally. And as people, we're drawn to what we are very good at. We're drawn to things that we just naturally love to do. And so there are very few people, if you put, 50 extension people in a room, there might be 3 people in that room that is going to go to an evaluation table, and everybody else is going to be at the implementers table. But having people who are strong implementers, you have to really get them into the mode of understanding that data collection and evaluation is a part of implementation. It is used to improve the implementation process. It's not something that you call Autumn to do because she's the evaluator, or you call me to do because I'm the evaluator. It doesn't work like that. So I would say as a best practice for evaluation work, whether it's CYFAR or any other type of project that you have funded, you have to have a dedicated person that champions for that work to be done, and also a person who continues to think outside the box. And when one way doesn't work, you say, okay, well, that didn't work, and let's see who it didn't work for, because it worked for some people, but maybe it didn't work for everybody. Let's see what data collection method we can use for this team over here and use that. So it's kind of like having a toolbox with a lot of different data collection methods in it. And for sites that fared well during the pandemic, they had multiple evaluation tools in their toolbox.
I think one thing that was tremendously helpful for me early on when I first got hired with a CYFAR grant was I'm not a researcher by passion, by strength, anything. I'm an implementer, and I am a relationship builder. And so I was a little bit terrified, to be quite honest with you, at the very beginning of my career with what the evaluation meant. And what I needed early on was someone to demystify it for me a little bit. And by that, I mean just taking a hold of me and saying, when we say the word evaluation, we're not talking about this huge, dissertation with multiple different types of statistical tests and needing to learn statistical programs and all of this kind of thing. Not at all. And so what I've learned through the years then is to take how I got pulled off to the side and told, this isn't as scary as you think it is, and here's why, and here's how it's done in everything that we do. Just like Jennifer just said, it's a part of all of it. It's interwoven into every piece of what we do. And then I think once I started to see it from that standpoint, it made it a whole lot less scary. I realized that a lot of what I'm doing as I'm implementing and continuing programs and everything, I'm evaluating them as I go, and it's not necessarily this big huge formal study that's scary. And that was what really I think helped me to embrace it a little bit better, not be as afraid of it, and now be able to educate others that come along on grants that I work with too.
Yeah, and you hinted at something, Carrie, that I think is really important, and that is getting buy-in from the staff, getting buy-in from all of your people about the direction that you're going, your whole program plan. Like evaluation's a piece of that, the whole program plan. And you need the folks who are on your team to have your back. And they need to understand what the whole program plan is. Even if they're not part of that piece of the puzzle, if they see how it fits together, they're more likely to be on board and to help make it happen. And I wrote down words: plan, making sure that you have all of your documents in place, making sure that if it's a Qualtrics survey that it's good to go, testing it and testing it and testing it again, testing it in situations with spotty internet, testing it in all of the places that it needs to work. We had a CYFAR program previous to the one that I'm in now that we use tablets for collecting evaluation. Well, guess what? If you go into rural North Carolina where there is no internet, there are no tablets. And so we figured out very quickly that that was not the way that we were going to be able to collect data. We also figured out our kids like filling out paper more than they like playing on tablets for evaluation purposes. They use different kinds of technology than we like to use as adults. And the evaluation software that I use is not one of those technologies that they like to play on. And so they may play tic-tac-toe with my evaluation. And so making sure that you are planning, you are preparing well, you are piloting, and be flexible. Because like Jennifer was saying, you need all of these different tools in your toolbox, because something is going to happen where your clientele does not understand the language on the survey and someone has to walk them through that. Or the power goes out in your building and your whole evaluation has been scrapped. Or you have really complex programs that you're doing and you have to plan 2 separate days to do evaluation that is required by CYFAR and do evaluation that is required by your program, so that you are not overburdening your participants, because survey fatigue is a thing. So.
To add to Autumn's comment about being flexible, there were several times when I was out collecting data. Our CYFAR project was a part of a larger project that we have funded, where we followed about 2,500 kids, and the data collection was a huge part of the process. There would be times where I would drive 4 hours one way to a school after being promised that the consent forms had gone out and they were sure they had been collected. And I walk into the principal's office and I recognized the very box that I shipped with the consent forms in it unopened. And I stood there and I thought, you got to be kidding me, right? This cannot be happening to me. I have driven 4 hours one way, and I just smiled. That's what I was saying on the inside. Like on the inside, I was livid. But on the outside, I smiled, and the principal said, oh, I was sure that those consent forms had been sent out. And I just smiled and said, it's okay. You know, I understand these things happen. You just let me know when it will be a good time for me to come back, and I'll be happy to come back, because after all, I recognize that I needed him. He didn't need me. And so I couldn't very well say, I cannot believe I sent you these consent forms 6 weeks ago and they are still in the freaking box. Are you kidding me? Right? So if I had said that, I would never be invited back. And so I smiled and I clenched my teeth and I made him feel like it was okay. It was not a big deal. Just let me know when to come back. And so it requires us to be extremely flexible, because things will go wrong. And so if you don't learn to laugh at stuff like that, I mean, I just got in my car, went to the local Subway because that was the only restaurant available. And I just sat down and ate a Subway sandwich and thought, well, I guess I'll run by the Dollar General. And I went by the Dollar General and I came on back. And the next time I went, you know, I didn't have that issue again. But there's always something that's going to go wrong. And so being flexible, having multiple tools in your toolbox, and I would say, as Carrie indicated, demystifying what it means to do evaluation work so that your team can give you the support that you need to make sure that it happens.
Oh, on that demystification point, I actually don't even introduce myself as an evaluator when I walk into a room with people, because the whole room, like the air changes.
Right. Nobody likes you.
Nobody likes you when you're.
No, I don't either. I don't say.
I introduce myself as a program storyteller because I do. I tell the program story. That's my job. So that's one of those things where being approachable is really important when you're talking about evaluation, and finding ways to use language that everybody understands, not just like the super smart evaluation people in the room, but everybody understands the language that you're using.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
This is Gretchen from Idaho, and I've been trying to have my camera on or off. I like it on, but our wind's blowing here in Idaho, and it makes our internet, go out. But I just am listening, and I just want you to know I'm laughing here behind my screen at some of these things that I've learned. I'm a manager of a Juntos program here in Jerome County, Idaho, and all of these things that you've said about team building, and I'm a relationship builder. That is my, my love language when you do the box, and I just am good at that. And the evaluation part is, I like the word you used about demystified, because we have to have it, and it's so great when you see it, but getting it done can be a little daunting in two languages. And so anyway, I just wanted to say thank you. And I am here behind my little picture, and this is terrific. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, just playing off of some of what Jennifer and Autumn have been talking about, and Jennifer mentioned just that whole idea, again, coming back to flexibility and what can go wrong will go wrong. When you've worked with these grants or in the grant world in general for many, many years, and you've learned to just, go with the flow at times and make the best out of a situation, it can be hard. It can be really, really hard at times. But sometimes good things can come out of what we don't think is a good thing in the moment that it's happening. Like Jennifer's example is perfect. I thought how I would react as Jennifer was talking a while ago, and I tend to be a little bit hot-headed. So at first I thought, oh, Jennifer handled that way better than I would have. But she's so right that in that situation, you need them. They may not need you, or at least they don't see that they need you yet. And it takes that relationship being built and the program happening and seeing those evaluation results for them to suddenly go, aha, we do need this. So the way that you handled it was absolutely amazing. But, one of the things that happened to me along the way that Jennifer and Philip both had to help me with a bit as my former coaches of a grant that I had myself was embracing things like losing people along the way on a grant. And when things don't go the way that you expected or wanted them to go. And we had a grant that focused on youth homelessness in Louisville, Kentucky. And we spent the better part of a whole year, didn't we, Jennifer, trying to find the perfect person to work on this grant. And we found him. And he was glorious. And he had been a homeless young adult himself, living under a bridge, and had come through all of the things that the kids we were working with on our CYFAR grant had come through. And you wouldn't have met anybody with more passion. And it was wonderful. And less than 2 years later, we lost him to a much higher paying, much more prestigious job that was offered to him through one of our grant partners on the grant, and it was hard for me at the time. And I remember calling Jennifer and saying, we'll never find another Nick. We won't. Well, then less than 3 months later, Corbin fell into our laps, and Corbin ended up being equally as amazing. And it was just hard for me to see when that one door shut, that another door was going to be able to open at first. And I know a lot of us have felt that way in the past year or two with the pandemic, that it's felt like so many doors are shut and so many obstacles have been put in our way. But I think at the end of the day, so much of that ultimately ends up making the program better and what we're doing better, more sustainable. It's just really hard sometimes to see the forest through the trees.
And you know what, Carrie, I think that the time Nick spent with the program, especially with the youth, I think his time there was intended to help them build trust in the program. So when Corbin came, she was able to work herself to a foundation that Nick built. And so sometimes I like to think of good people, you know, when you have somebody really good, you just already know, okay, it's just going to be a matter of time. It's going to be a matter of time, because as that person's skills start to build, somebody's looking for that skill set, right? And so half of me is selfish in saying, gosh, I need to keep this person locked in the closet, because as soon as we go to that partnership meeting, as soon as we go to this conference, as soon as we go to a networking event, somebody's going to take her from me. And then the other half of me says, now, Jennifer, you know that's not right. That is just wrong all the way around. But it's the world that we live in. And so what helped me get past that is knowing that the good a person does for our program can be so strong, even if it's just temporary. And their role in our path, it has been just what Nick provided. He gave a great foundation for the next person to come in, because I don't think it would have been as easy for a person to start working with the group that had not lived in the same situation that those children had lived in. I think that would have been a completely different scenario. And he was awesome.
I love that, building trust within the program. I think that's awesome and amazing.
If you use it, you have to pay me.
Absolutely.
I want royalties.
But I think that story actually brings up a good point and a good question. So what is the best way to use your CYFAR coach? I mean, how can you lean on them? The question, what is the best way to use your CYFAR coach?
Don't wait till your monthly call if you have an issue. Like I don't know if it's good practice or not, y'all. Judge me. I have some boundary issues, but I've given my cell phone number to all of my PIs, because stuff doesn't happen 9 to 5 in some of our programs. The stuff decides to hit the fan when like it's 5:30 and everybody's gone home, and you need to have a conversation with somebody. And so don't wait until that monthly meeting to have a conversation with your coach. And don't keep your coach all to yourself either. I like being on the team calls when I'm doing coaching, because then I can see all of the moving parts and pieces that are happening in a program. And so I do connect separately as needed with my PIs, but making sure that the coaches, the staff has access to the coach as well, I think is important, although they don't have my cell phone. So.
I agree with Autumn. I'll use Carrie and I as an example. When I was her coach, we talked to each other all the time. I mean, and sometimes I would call her and say, hey, I'm struggling with something. Can you help me? And it wasn't necessarily that I was always coaching her. Oftentimes she was coaching me. And so it would be things related to CYFAR. If I was struggling with another program, I would pick up the phone and say, hey, I need to run something by you. Can you tell me, what do you think about this? And so I think when you have a solid trusting relationship with your coach, where you know that your coach's role is to support you, and sometimes that support looks like giving you a tap on the shoulder and saying, hey, now we need to think about doing this a little differently. Sometimes that tap on the shoulder is a job well done. But I think overall what that relationship looks like can spin off into support going both ways. And so what I've learned as a coach, I always go into my coaching role with the expectation that I'm going to learn something from the site that I'm working with. And I look forward to learning those things because it helps me keep my skills up. And so I take those things and I take them back to my own programs and I put them to practice to see if they work, if they didn't work, and why did they work. And so For the sites that I've coached, I can honestly say that the relationship that we built moved past coaching into a relationship where I can pick up the phone and call and say, you know what, I'm not really sure what to do about this. Can you help me with that?
Yeah, I find that I have more learning moments than anything else as a coach. And I absolutely love that. And it keeps me fresh. I mean, when you're in your third decade of a career, you know, sometimes it can be hard to stay fresh with things and be excited and energized, but CYFAR keeps me energized. Working with these grants keeps me energized. And being a student, you know, I learned so much, as Jennifer said. I reach out to people and say, hey, you know, I've got somebody who's doing such and such, but they might need a few ideas for this, you know, and can we connect together? I love that connecting part. And then I think for me, the biggest thing through the years with having Philip and Jennifer as my own coaches and now being a coach myself is remembering that these people are our champions. You know, I think sometimes when we first start off or we don't know someone yet, we think, oh, this is big brother or big sister, right? They're making sure we're doing all the things we're supposed to do on a grant and we're not messing up or missing something. But, you know, remembering that these are people who have been through a lot of similar things, maybe not necessarily with CYFAR, but with at least working with grants or out in the federal world or in extension, and we're a support system to one another. And there have been some moments when I have turned to the Autumns and the Jennifers and said, I just need to unload. I've got so much weighing so heavily on me with some of the work that we do, it can get heavy. And then, you know, asking my grant sites to know that I'm the kind of person that they can do that with right in return. We had a 13-year-old who went into labor at a program on a CYFAR grant that I work with not too terribly long ago. And that night, like Autumn said, it's not an 8 to 5 thing. That night they called me in tears and said, we just got to talk through this. We got to talk through what just happened to us. It's done, but we got to talk through it. And, you know, that's the kind of thing that we hope to be there for all of you on as you're working through these grants. They not only change the participants we work with, but they change us, and they change us for the better. But that can sometimes be very heavy, and it's not something you can just check at the door when you get home at 5 o'clock or what have you with your own families.
Yeah. So thank you for that. Like I said, that's all you can really say is that you know, those are those powerful stories, and those are the things that we work through when we talk about working, you know, with CYFAR. So thanks for that. So do you guys feel like you're on an island, or do you feel like you have support in your role as a coach?
Oh, I definitely feel like we have support. You know, thinking about the coaching model when we first started is very different than what we have now, right? So, you know, when the PDTA Center was created from this split, well, I won't say it was 3 different sites. There was, you know, evaluation in one university, and there was professional development in another university, and technology in another university. And then we shifted to a all-inclusive PDTA center. It was brand new. And as a coach at that time, it oftentimes did feel like we were just kind of finding our way, because it was so new and we were moving from liaisons to coaches, and there wasn't a lot of information about what is a CYFAR coach and what does this person do and how is this person different from my liaison, and like what's really going on in CYFAR. It's just too much change. But you know, having had the experience as a coach when coaching first started, and the experience that I have now is very different, because the center itself has evolved into a much more robust just group. The resources, the thinking, you know, everything that's made available to us as coach, the time that is poured into us as coaches, I think allows us to be a better coach.
Well, we have regular coaching meetings, so all of the folks who we're coaching don't get to see that, but every other week we're meeting as a coaching team, and we are talking about best practices, and we're doing professional development. You know, Philip keeps us on our toes and brings us professional development and makes us talk about things and makes us expand our brains and makes us actually do some of the teaching of the professional development. And so that's all that is happening in the background. And we also have some pretty incredible people who are at the University of Minnesota and at Penn State University. And those folks that support this work are pouring themselves into this as well. And just, we have really robust support systems for us as coaches.
It's the perfect example of change being necessary, even though it's sometimes hard to deal with. You know, being around as long as Jennifer and Autumn and I all have, there's kind of times when you think, okay, well, I know who to go to for this and I know what to do with that. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But, you know, ain't broke, don't fix it is a different level than can it be improved and can it evolve? And that's where I think a lot of things have gone through the years in terms of a lot of our work nationally with CYFAR. And I've loved being a part of all of it. And I think it's a very, very supportive group of movers and shakers doing some amazing work in this country.
So I'll just ask everybody one last time if there's anything in particular you want to ask the coaches, because we have about a couple more minutes before we break. All right. Well, if not, then what you see in your chat window is the link to the Zoom room for our closing for day 2. So our closing for day 2 will start in about 2 minutes. So again, we thank you all for being here.